Weston's From Ritual to Romance. I can't help but think that chapter 9 in particular is something that the later Joseph Campbell referred to. The gradual process of our investigation has led us to the conclusion that the elements forming the existing Grail legend, the setting of the story, the nature of the task which awaits the hero, the symbolic and the symbols and their significance, one and all, while finding their counterpart in prehistoric record, present remarkable parallels to the extent, practice, and belief of countries so widely separate as the British Isles, Russia, and Central Africa. The explanation of so curious a fact, for it is a fact and not a mere hypothesis, so it's become a theory, right? May, it was suggested, most probably be found in the theory that in this fascinating literature we have the sometimes partially understood, sometimes wholly misinterpreted record of a ritual, originally presumed to exercise a life-giving potency which, at one time of universal observance, has, even in its decay, shown itself possessed of elements of the most persistent vitality. That, if the ritual, which, according to our theory, lies at the root of the Grail story, be indeed the ritual of a life cult, it should, in per se, possess precisely these characteristics, which will, I think, be admitted by any fair-minded critic. The point, of course, is we can definitely prove our theory, i.e., not merely a point to striking parallels, but select from the figures and incidents composing our story some one element which, by showing itself capable of explanation on this theory, and on this theory alone, may be held to afford decisive proof of the soundness of our hypothesis? It seems to me that there is one such element in the bewildering complex by which the theory can be thus definitively tested, that is, the personality of the central figure and the title by which he is known. If we can prove that the Fisher King, qua Fisher King, is an integral part of the ritual and can be satisfactorily explained alike by its intention and inherent symbolism, we shall, I think, have taken the final step which will establish our theory upon a sure basis. On the other hand, if the Fisher King, qua Fisher King, does not fit into our framework, we shall be forced to conclude that, while the province of certain elements of the Grail literature is practically assured, the ensemble has been complicated by the introduction of a terminology which, whether the outcome of a serious intention or of mere literary caprice, was foreign to the original source, and so far defies explanation. In this latter case, our theory would not necessarily be manque, but would certainly be seriously incomplete. And we kind of think of Jesus talking about people being fishers of men, and in an age of Pisces, historical rise of Judaism, historical rise of Christianity under Paul, well, second book of Maccabees, the books of Maccabees, Paul, was the heliacal vernal equinox rising of the fish of Pisces. So that could be why this sort of thing became a dominant story. We have already seen that the personality of the king, the nature of the disability under which he is suffering, and the reflex effect exercised upon his folk and his land correspond in a most striking manner to the intimate relation at one time held to exist between the ruler and his land, a relation mainly dependent upon the identification of the king with the divine principle of life and fertility, This relation, as we have seen above, exists today among certain African tribes. If we examine more closely into the existing variants of our romance, we shall find that those very variants are not only thoroughly dans the cadre of our proposed solution, but also afford a valuable and hitherto unsuspected indication of the relative priority of the versions. In Chapter 1, I discussed the task of the hero in general. Here I propose to focus attention upon his host, and while, in a measure, traversing the same ground, to do so with a view to determining the true character of this enigmatic personage. In the Bleheris version, the lord of the castle is suffering under no disability whatever. He is described as tall and strong of limb, of no great age, but somewhat bald. Besides the king, there is a dead knight upon a bier, over whose body vespers for the dead are solemnly sung. There's 6 causes of baldness, and it would have started when I was a teenager if it was the stereotypical one. But society sort of had a mustache, beard, bald spot sort of way of telling men apart by age, and often giving them status accordingly. Besides the king, there is a dead knight upon a bier, over whose body vespers for the dead are solemnly sung. The wasting of the land, partially restored by Gawain's question concerning the lance, has been caused by the dolorous stroke, i.e., the stroke which brought about the death of the knight, whose identity is here never revealed. Certain versions which interpolate the account of Joseph of Arimathea and the Grail allude to La Riche Pasteur and his heirs as Joseph's descendants, and presumably, for it is not directly stated, guardians of the Grail, but the king himself is here never called by that title. From his connection with the wasteland, it seems more probable that it was the dead knight who filled that role. In the second version, of which Gawain is the hero, is that of Dio Crone. The host is an old man, an infirm man. After Gawain has asked the question, we learn that he is really dead, and only compelled to retain the semblance of life till the task of the quester be achieved. Here again, he is not called the Fisher King. In the Perceval versions, on the contrary, we find the name invariably associated with him, but he is not always directly connected with the misfortunes which have fallen upon his land. Thus, while the Woucher texts are incomplete, breaking off at the critical moment of asking the question, Manessier, who continues and ostensibly completes Woucher, introduces the dead knight. Here, Gundesert, or Gondefer, which I suspect is the more correct form, brother of the king, whose death by treachery has plunged the land in misery and has been the direct cause of the self-wounding of the king. The healing of the king and the restoration of the land depend on Perceval's slaying the murderer Partenal. The two versions show a combination of Perceval and Gawain themes, such as their respective dates might lead us to suspect. Robert de Boron